Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about the fact that a lot of the common arguments against Conjugate, and when we say common arguments, will be arguments by people who are not trying to sell you something, meaning sell you another program, because that's its own set of arguments. The common argument made by people who are selling you something else is that, one, Conjugate doesn't work, which is provably false. Number two, that Conjugate's a low volume program, also provably false. It's insanely high volume training, right? So those are just straight up lies being used to sell other stuff, right? Those are con men. And I like some of those con men. I'm friends with some of those con men, but it is being a con man, and they know better. They know they're lying. So what we're talking about is going to be when people make all these statements about, well, Conjugate addresses all these things that aren't powerlifting. And that's the flaw in the logic. Okay. What do I mean? Conjugate makes you good at powerlifting because it makes you strong and athletic and powerful. Right? Let's go back over and look at that again. The Conjugate method, or the West Side method, makes you good at powerlifting because it makes you strong, athletic, and powerful. That's the argument against it. A lot of the arguments against the methods, the arguments against the box squat, the arguments against the speed work, the argument against the bands is what? Well, those are just good for athletes. That stuff is just there to make you explosive for speed strength type sports. It's not that useful for powerlifting. That's their counter argument. And I want to take that in a different direction. Well, if you're going to train, why don't you get more than one thing out of it? Okay. It's not like there's a downside. Ooh, gee, there's the issue we come to. The assumption that if you get more explosive, that you won't be as good at powerlifting. Really? You're telling me that you can't take a world-class sprinter and teach them to powerlift and make them good at powerlifting just because they're explosive already? That that's going to hurt them? I mean, it's like the guys who argue of size versus strength. Well, you know, for your genetics and your structure and for whatever drugs you happen to choose to put into your body, they're pretty well tied together. Right? It varies from person to person due to insertions, frame size. Height's the biggest one, by the way. Height's enormous. Some of these other things, yeah, okay, fine. It varies from person to person, but not for you. For you as a person, you as an individual, you, Joe Bob, whatever your name is, size and strength will be 90% overlapped. Okay? You can only deviate about 10% in either direction. It will be a larger variation between you and your buddy, especially if he's a different height than you. Man, different length of legs and arms, that's going to matter. Okay, that'll matter a lot. But for you as a person, because you can't change your bone structure, right? You can't change your bone structure. You cannot change your muscle insertion points. Right? You can't change where your tendons attach to your bones. Any of this stuff could be risky surgeries if you were to attempt it, and it would probably make you suck. Right? You have the structure that you have. So you can't really get those advantages of, oh, this guy has this great size versus, well, that's his structure. Okay, that's it. That's the only reason. That's it. That is the only reason. And you can't change that. All right. But people have this idea that you have a disadvantage. Oh, if you train for strength, you won't have size, or if you train for some size, you won't have strength. What? They're all overlapped. They're all overlapped. There's no disadvantage. Like, you're not going to be smaller because you try to get really, really strong. Unless you just don't do any training volume, but then you're not going for strength, you're going for relative strength. Okay? If you intentionally stay small and try to get strong, you're not getting as strong as possible, you're just trying to get really strong pound for pound. Someone who's trying to get really strong has to get big. They have to go together. Your training reflects that. But let's go back over to the point. They act like there's a disadvantage. Well, because you're getting explosive, it's not going to make you better at whatever, this slower movement, the deadlift. But it's not going to hurt you either. We can argue whether it's going to help you. That's a point of contention. Okay. So if you take a world-class sprinter with amazing explosiveness, or a high jumper, he's not going to be able to deadlift because he's explosive. That's what you're saying. That it prevents him if we were to train him for powerlifting. You know how stupid that sounds? That's how they sound, but that is what their argument essentially is. That is their argument. They just don't realize that's their argument. What else? Well, it makes you athletic. And athleticism doesn't matter for the squat, bench, and deadlift. None of that matters. Well, it could affect your training volumes and work capacity. Being in shape and being athletic will let you train a lot more. You can train more, you can get bigger and stronger. Okay. But that's their arguments. And let's come over to what Conjugate is. Yes, they're right. Conjugate is not as powerlifting specific as people think it is. It's a general training system for anyone who is in a strength-oriented or power-oriented sport. That is what it is. I don't care what that sport is. I don't care if it's powerlifting, strength lifting, American football, rugby, MMA, boxing, hell, even bodybuilding, although that's not a sport. Piss the bodybuilders. Oh, it's not a sport. Shut up. I don't have time for it today, Bob. It's Friday. It's not a sport. Shut up. You know it's not a sport. Now, that being said, I know some natty bodybuilders who run Conjugate and help them with their bodybuilding. It is a training system designed to maximize strength, power, and athleticism. Then you add sport specificity on top of it. The argument from the other side is that if you want to be good at powerlifting, just train for powerlifting. Just train to be good at the big three. Well, why? People break records doing both approaches, right? Dozens of world record holders follow both approaches. And it's literally this idea, well, I don't care about this other stuff. I only care about powerlifting. And it's like, well, what about if you could be good at powerlifting and have a free $1 billion on top of it? Would you only care about the powerlifting? Or if you just train slightly different, right? You train slightly different, spent the same time in the gym, got to the same strength level, right? Got to the same strength level, but you got $1 million with it. Would you turn that down because you only care about powerlifting? No, you wouldn't turn it. You would or wouldn't? Okay, how about we take it less? Okay, if that $1 million is excessive, how about just an extra $1,000? If you train slightly differently, got just as strong, but you got the bonus of an extra $1,000, I don't know, every year, as a bonus with it, would you turn it down? You just have to train slightly different, still get just as strong. It's an added bonus. Or, I don't know, you could have sex with the most attractive woman in the world to you, assuming you're not already married to her. Would you turn it down if it came with your powerlifting total? Not at the price of it, but with it. So you don't care just about the big three. You obviously would take other benefits, other fringe benefits with it. Well, how about being more athletic and more explosive and having less injuries? See, these are added benefits. It's not a downside. It's not costing you strength. If anything, it makes you more versatile and able to do other stuff. I mean, God forbid you should ever decide to do anything but test your strength on the squat, bench, or deadlift. You might even test your strength on a fourth lift one day somewhere. would come in handy then, wouldn't it? You might need to actually jump or sprint or you pick up another sport. Sure would be helpful then, wouldn't it? It didn't cost you anything. You just had to train a little different. That's not a negative. That's not an argument. Alright guys, well that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.